So we'll go ahead and do a soft start because I want to make sure that we get time to go through all this wonderful information and also be able to have time to just have discussions and answer any questions that you may have. My name is Dr. Masisa Goss. Most people call me Dr. G. I'm the program director here at Mental Health America of Hawaii. And today what we're going to be talking about is how to build a toolbox. I am actually joined today by Jessica Gleason. Jessica, if you want to say hi.
Hi, aloha.
She is a librarian at the Wailuku Public Library, and she's going to be giving us a lot of really fantastic book recommendations. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is jump into some of the sensory items that we have picked out today, and then I'll hand it over for the last half for Jessica to be able to share these wonderful books and an opportunity that is happening at the Wailuku Public Library that we're really excited about and really honored to be able to partner with. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and talk about some of these tools. So today what we're going to be going over is how to build an actual self-care toolbox for Keiki. I get asked this question a lot because we do talk about different types of tools, but I've never actually sat down and build one just in front of people and said, this is what I would put into my toolbox. And that's really what I thought would be helpful. Now, granted, this is a topic you could build so many different kinds of toolboxes, and we could talk about Keiki Self-Care for many, many different kinds of topics. Any of the ones we go over today could definitely be gone in depth for hours if need be, but I wanted to do a general overview of some of the things that we'd be putting in it. So for today, my toolbox is just going to be my basket in front of me. And what I'm going to be doing is going through the different types of tools, and we're going to do it by the structure of sensory items. The reason I chose to do it that way, because you could do it specific to development, grade level, interest, so many different ways to do it. But what I wanted to talk about is the importance of doing it by sense. The reason why we talk about that is because children are really sense related. They are very much into behavior, into their different senses like touch and smell. They're really directed and calmed by those types of things. So I thought it could be helpful to break it down by the different types that can go into your basket according to the different senses. Before we get started, I always like to start with a quote if you've ever joined us before for a webinar. And this is one that I think is super important for us to remember as we go through a process of learning how to teach our Keiki about emotions. And this one is actually by John Kabat-Zinn. He's really well known in the meditation circles, but it basically says the little things, the little moments, they aren't little. And I think that's really true. We forget how much those small things can impact our Keiki and why it's so important to slow things down and really kind of deepen our experience when we're trying to teach them and engage with them. The first sense I'm going to talk about is probably the one that we're most familiar with thinking about when it comes into terms with our Keiki. What we know is that visual stimuli can help ground children and orient them to the day. One of the first things I want to put into my basket is basically calming jars. If you are familiar with them, I will go ahead and say that these are glass, and I wouldn't recommend that for the small ones, but they are beautiful. And most of the time when we make them here in the office, they get appropriated to adult desks. And the reason why is because visually they're very calming. You can color them into all kinds of different colors. And we're going to talk about how to make these in just a few minutes. But this is going to be one of those first things that I put into my toolbox. We're also going to look at the idea of having really colorful books. I think that when we talk about our littlest ones, it can be difficult to find really great board books. And I would say your library is a wonderful place to go for recommendations. I was kind of moving around town this weekend and found this beautiful board book, and it comes in all these amazing colors and illustrations. So sometimes we happen upon these wonderful tools, but sometimes it's hard to find. So think about people who could give you those great recommendations and help you find them to be able to add those into your toolbox. The other thing we would think about when we talk about our Keiki is that sometimes when we talk about that orientation to the day, it can be difficult as they transition to a little bit of an older age with a little bit more responsibility. We know that it takes a lot of reminding. And one of the things that can be most helpful is just to have a visual schedule. If the first thing you want them to do when they wake up is to brush their teeth and brush their hair, and then there's like 4 or 5 items that you want them to do, having just a visual picture of what those things are and what order they should go in, hanging somewhere that's very accessible to them behind the door on the bathroom mirror, so that they know, okay, I've done that thing and I've done that thing, and then they're tracking for the day. It's just a great reminder because sometimes we A, forget to remind them, but also B, we get tired, right? And so having that visual reminder is a great way to say, okay, you've done that. Now what's next? And they can look at it. So it can even work before they have the language to have really in-depth conversation around it because they can visually recognize it. We're also going to talk about the use of how to do check-in charts, and we're going to do that a little bit in depth in just a moment. Another fun tool I think that we can add to our box are these grow and discover toys. You see them all over the place, but what's really nice about these is it creates a kind of continuity of time for kids. So for this one, it's just to grow a dinosaur out of an egg. So for our dinosaur loving Keiki, they do have fun options. And you just put it into the water, wait and let it dissolve. But the good thing about it is that it helps them come again, orient to time, but concentrate on something other than maybe what's happening that's distracting, that's anxiety provoking in front of them. Just a little bit of a distraction can be really nice. It's really easy, I think, that when we are working with Keiki or when we have them in our life, that, they can be, my family would say clutter bugs, that they pull the toys out, they engage and have that fun play. But it's also important to remember that, especially for our anxious, our stressed Keiki, that visual clutter can feel like emotional clutter. And if we're wanting to cut down on that, what can be really helpful is kind of just having large bins and saying these are our current toys, and then we're going to put these into a little bit of a break. We'll bring those out later, because visual clutter absolutely can add to their stress, and that when they're able to kind of orient and engage in their environment, the less cluttered it is, the more relaxed they may feel. When we build our toolbox, we want to make sure that it is accessible, that it is in their visual line of sight. It's kind of like one of those things like out of sight, out of mind, and they forget that there is this amazing thing that can help them calm and relax. And what we want to make sure is they see it, they know where it's at, that when they're feeling distressed, anxious, or sad, they can go to that. They see it as a visual reminder to say, there's something in there that can help me feel better. Some of the tools we're going to go over, especially if it's for our littlest ones, you might not want to put in the basket, just because, for example, a calming jar, even if it's done in plastic, probably includes some food coloring, and you don't want to be surprised later if they've managed to open that up and it's everywhere. So some of those items might be in a secondary place that they can ask for. Maybe they can see it, they just can't access it on their own, because we want to make sure that it's not stressful for you to have this around as well, and you don't have to supervise around it. Another thing that can be helpful, because I will say there are a lot of really great apps. There's a lot of great places to go to for videos and things that engage the children, but sometimes it can be one of those things where they spend a lot of time using different digital tools. And instead of getting into their own like physical and sensory engagement, they get into a passive pursuit of using those kind of digital screens instead. And so it can be really nice to have just a limit on that, so that they're still exploring their world. They're still doing it in a way that's very kind of body oriented and not so much passively oriented. I said we would talk about the calming jars. The one that is kind of on the screen was one of our favorite ones, because it was, when you shook it up, it was black and then disappeared to clear again. But these calming jars, this is one of our favorite. You can see how it picks up that light. They're really quite easy to make. And so if you have just a plastic container at your house, you have some of that clear craft glue, food coloring, and then just warm water. What you're going to do is you're going to add it into a container. You're going to put the warm water in with that clear glue and let it dissolve. The more glue you put, the slower it falls. So there's a rainbow array that we made in office testing these theories, and you can see how quickly the black one falls, and you can see how slow this one falls. When we make these, one of the kind of secrets to get that beautiful kind of light and iridescence is to use a really specific glitter that is iridescent. You just add it in there. Another secret is to use it in different sizes. And for this one, for example, there's a touch of green and there's a touch of silver in here as well, just kind of hidden in those gold flecks to give it more depth. These are great, but I will say it needs a lot of supervision because of that food coloring. And when you use food coloring, it's very staining. I recommend doing this little project outside, but we also know that that little bit goes a long way. So it's better to dip a toothpick into the food coloring and then drop it in, because you can't take away as easily as you can continue to add. But these are a fantastic way to just get that moment for them to sit, watch something beautiful, and just relax and ground back in through their sense of sight. We do have the instructions to this on our website, and we'll talk about where to find that, but it's easily findable. And the secret to the fall, again, is the amount of glue that you use. We, some people that I worked with had a question of like, how slow can we have it fall? And the answer was like a week or two, it was still slowly suspended and falling. So you really can use this. Some of the parents that I know actually didn't use it as a sensory item, but used it as a timeout, kind of like time to calm down. And when the glitter falls to the bottom, you're allowed to get back up. But these can also be used just to enjoy that beautiful fall. We talked about the emotion scales, and these are actually examples of worksheets that we have available. And I think the important thing about the emotion scale is, again, to post it where it's highly visible. How these work is it's a very simple Likert scale from 1 to 5. And here we use, again, those emoticons because it's easier for our kids who have a little bit more limited language or just are a little bit less expressive to be able to say, when we have the frowny face, that is our 1. I'm having a really hard time. So give me an example of a time where you felt upset. Tell me a story. Now tell me something that made you feel better, that moved you up into yellow or even green. Do we want to anchor the middle? Because the reality is a lot of times we're just in the middle and there's nothing wrong with the neutral part, right? That's what most of life is. And so tell me what neutral looks like for you. And how do you kind of move from neutral into green? Or what things can happen to move you into the red? Now they're starting to understand the complexity of, even when I'm here, things can happen to move me in either direction. But we're also getting anchors, we're getting stories, so that when they tell us, this is where I'm at, you can say, oh, is it like the time? And then you repeat back the story they shared with you. So you can see building in emotional anchors, helping them with storytelling, normalizing talking about how they feel. And then even in the green, we want them to give us a great example of what that feels like and what they can do that keeps them in the green. We also want to model the behavior that we want to see from them. So we need to do this as well, to check in with ourselves or just to talk to them about it. Say, I'm in the green. How are you doing? Right? We want to model the behavior we want to see. Sometimes I think we get to a place of like, this is where we want to be with them. And we don't always model it ourselves, but we have to kind of remember that old adage of monkey see, monkey do. So we want to be able to show them that that's what we want and that we're using it as well. It's most effective when everyone in the household is using it. Some of you may be saying a 5-point is a little advanced for my little one, and that's true, it could be. So what we can do is simplify it down to a 3-point, and that's going to be kind of symbolically represented by something that they're really familiar with, which is a stoplight, that you can say, what color are you? And they tell you, oh, I'm red. I need to stop. I feel upset. I need something from my toolbox. Or they can say yellow. I'm not sure. Let me think about it. Like they're just checking in with themselves. Or they can say green. I'm good to go. And they just keep zipping through the house. But you can see how easy it is just to say, what color are you? And they just tell you. They can check in with themselves and see what they need. It starts to normalize talking about emotions. It starts to help them understand it's okay to ask for help if you're in the red or you're in the yellow. And that's something that's kind of priceless when they're that little. The next one we're going to talk about is smell. I I think we forget how strongly associated smell is to memory and emotion. When you think about comfort, and I say, what smell comes to mind? We often think about a really close attachment figure's perfume or what their house smelled like, or we think about a really specific food item. It's why, like, for example, I hope I'm not telling anyone secrets, but why realtors bake in houses they're trying to sell, they'll put cookies or cinnamon rolls into the oven because people walk in and go, oh, smells like a home I'd want. We understand on some level that smell is a very important aspect to our sensory engagement. Something that can be helpful. I have a whole desk full of items, so I'm trying to go through them, is aromatherapy. But I want to be really careful to say that some essential oils are not safe to diffuse around children. Some are not safe to be put directly onto the skin. If you're not familiar with aromatherapy, I'd highly recommend you working with someone who is well versed in it and well skilled in it, because we want to make sure it's done safely for both children and pets at a really safe diffusion rate, or for putting it on skin. But aromatherapy can be, if you are familiar with it or you're going to work with someone, really helpful. It can be something as simple as adding a calming scent into lotion that they are already using or into a diffusion. You can also make rollers where, when it's correctly put into oils and it's a really relaxing scent, can help them go to sleep. So there's all kinds of different ways we can include that. Sometimes we think we have to like create it or build it ourselves, but there's a lot of different places that actually have aromatherapy put into items specifically, and it's done and it's safe. And so that can include things like soap or lotion. The reason I think that lotion is such an interesting one is because it can also help with tactile. So if you have a really nice relaxing scent and you kind of put that on your child's hands and their little feet and massage it in, it can help them feel very relaxed when they're feeling anxious and stressed. And they can also learn that they can do it themselves. So that's a great one where you get those two different senses engaged. You can also find laundry detergent that you really enjoy, that the child really enjoys. And so when the fresh laundry comes out, they can smell it. It just reminds them like, okay, I'm safe, I'm relaxed, I'm grounding down. They also might like specific flowers, and so you can grow them in your garden or just bring them into the house every once in a while so they can enjoy them. There's lots of different things that can be scented. I think that sometimes we forget that creativity goes a very long way. And so they do have things like scented markers or even scented bubbles that they can use and really enjoy that kind of engagement. There is one example I did want to talk about for a moment that I thought was so cleverly done. This was something another counselor had taught me, and it's the monster or nightmare spray. For our little ones who maybe still are a little bit fearful at night, who might have concerns about the monster under the bed or might have night terrors, have a hard time sleeping on their own, what you can do is get a very simple sprayer, add in some water, put in your perfume or a really calming scent, label it for them like it's a nightmare spray or a good dream spray, it's a anti-monster spray, and just leave it by the bed. And so as they're going to sleep, if they start to feel a little uncomfortable and uneasy, you just take it and spray the bad things away. It's a really nice way to help them feel empowered, because when you go to sleep, they still have the spray with them and they're still able to feel comforted by that item. Our next sense that we're going to talk about is taste. So I think this one is one that's a little bit underrated sometimes. It's kind of hard to think about how would that work when we're thinking about our toolbox. But we want to think about things like healthy snacks to make those really easily accessible. Again, it might not go directly into your box, but we want to make sure that they know where they are, that they're really accessible. Definitely supervise if you're going to be using hard candy or gum. We do have some Keiki, unfortunately, who do have some trauma or high anxiety. And so it can be very nice to be able to have those on hand to give it to them, so that immediate flood of flavor can help reground them, because again, that's that taste orientation. You might also choose to make sure that they know where to access their favorite cups and bowls. They have a very high interest in which ones they use. I'm sure most of you are going, yes, I can think exactly about which bowl or cup they would want if they were, wanting to feel more secure. And so depending upon what it is, you absolutely can add that into your toolbox so that they can seek it out when they need it. One of the other things I think that can be really nice is just letting him help in the kitchen. Because again, there's that tactile engagement of cooking something with you, smelling what they're cooking. There's a gardener that I love to follow, Ron Finley, and he says if they grow it, they eat it. And so something interesting that can happen is with taste is to help kind of remind them about the things that they're growing or cooking in the kitchen so they get reoriented to it. And hopefully they'll start to eat even some of those more persnickety vegetables that they're not as open to trying. For me, touch is probably one of the, if not the most important senses, because we do notice how quickly it can help ground. Something that can be helpful, and this is kind of dependent upon the child. So I put soft fabrics, but for some kids, they might like something that's a little less like silky. So some children I've seen say they like that feel of like silk or satin. Others like that, just that feel of like that kind of faux, like that kind of Sherpa kind of soft, squishy feel. But others will like things like linen or flannel, and it really depends upon the child, but it can be really nice to know what is most effective for them and to have that there and accessible to them. This is one of my one of my like favorite kind of secret things because it does have this nice outer coating. I can pull it off and wash it, but also secretly inside, I have a pouch where I can add in dried herbs if I want to in a pouch, but I can also put a small cotton ball in that smells like the essential oil that I want to use. And there's a different feel, soft feel underneath if there's someone who doesn't enjoy this texture but does enjoy this one. So you can find some great sensory items in different materials, and these plushies come in so many great fabrics now. I was very tempted to buy one for this webinar that I saw this weekend, but was like, you don't need any additional ones. The other thing that can work when we start to talk about touch is this idea of things like squishies and poppers. And so this is the one that we have here at Mental Health of America. And it's just one of these really nice squish toys. It's nice to keep them in a container where they stay clean. You know they're not going to stay clean for long, but squishies are great to add in because most people use these in some aspect, whether it's a stress ball or it's this. You notice a lot of people gravitate towards them. And one that you've probably seen more recently are these poppers. I wasn't so sure how I'd feel about them. Clearly, I like dinosaurs as well. But they have these nice colors that they come in, and they really are quite soothing when you just need to like do something instead of like pen clicking or any other kind of anxiety or stress related behaviors. This can be a nice alternative to it. I think that we forget that there's all these new tools coming out, and sometimes it's nice just to try them out and see if they're a good fit for us. If you have Keiki in your life, I'm sure you're very familiar with slime. For good or for bad, I'm sure you're familiar with it. But you can find all kinds of different slimes that include ones that are scented. And so again, you're pulling in different types of engagement because this now has the aromatherapy portion and the tactile portion. So you can always get these. You can also find ones that are done in sand. Now, one of the complaints I've heard from people is that these are expensive, and they can be, especially if you're doing things like sensory sand. But there's a lot of really easy recipes that help you make it for very little cost. And so while this might cost, X amount of dollars, you can do it for a fraction of that by doing it at home. I used to make them on units when I worked in a psychiatric unit. And just by bulk, we would make them and we would add aromatherapy to them. So again, you get that tactile and that smell portion to them. We concentrate a little bit on the squishy aspect, but can also be something as simple as a smooth stone. So this one has that nice coloration, little rainbow iridescence, and it's smooth on one side, but carved on the other. And again, for those dinosaur loving kids, it's carved into a stegosaurus. So you get that kind of touchstone that they can put into their pocket, which is really helpful. Even for teens, I would often recommend them have those touchstones so that when they feel anxious, they can put their hand in their pocket and just rub and have that smooth experience. Other things that can be helpful, I think that we had our time with fidget spinners. But for some kids, it is really effective to be able just to kind of like have that different thing available, maybe not have it at school if you think it's going to be too distracting, but have it in the box at home. You can also include puzzles and mazes if they like to be really hands-on in making things and creating things. One that I thought was very interesting was one that was popular actually with kids and adults, and that was bubble wrap, being able to sit and to pop and to kind of have that moment. It's interesting how many of us still get the pops and still pop them. You know, it's a very mindful moment that we have. The other thing that can be helpful is, and this is for touch, and I think that if you have little ones, you know, they love band-aids, they love stamps, they love kind of any of those things. If you leave them alone, which I did discover recently with a stamp, it can get very interesting. They'll stamp everywhere, but it can be nice if you want to improve or increase a specific behavior to have these little stamps around and have them where they can't access them. But when they do the behavior you wanted them to do, when they like do the chore or do the activity, that you're able to immediately reward them with something. I mean, it's very visual for them, and it also has that tactile piece. So stamps are a great way to have like behavioral reinforcements if you're working on a specific activity or skill. Another one that I found that was highly effective, I would often use this with my Keiki that I worked with who are a little bit more like hygiene adversive, but they can be used for all kinds of things. And that's temporary tattoos. So for my Keiki that I worked with that were hygiene adversive, I'd say they only stick to clean skin. And so after the showers, they'd say, I'm clean, I'm clean. And we put it on. And then I'd say, well, we only get a new one when the old one's gone. And so they were really good about washing their hands and being ready to like take that next shower. So these can be a great motivator for them if that's happening, but also in general, they really love the different, like you can get animals and insects and just having them in that place. And so they know that those are special and specific to rewarding for those behaviors. Temperature is one that's a little bit trickier, I think. You'll notice that children really like to play with temperature items, but again, they kind of need a lot of supervision around it. But if you think about it in terms of like, if they're outside playing and you have a bowl of cold water, maybe to add some ice cubes into it. If you have one of those sensory toys that you can heat up, that's a great time to heat it, but be really mindful that it doesn't overheat and check it before you give it to them. Feet are a very interesting place to kind of think about when you think about touch, but when I worked with some keiki, it could be helpful for them when they get home after a hard day. They would like to push their feet into the sand, but they also sometimes like to push their feet into just beans, like dried beans. Now we keep those separate to make sure they don't get confused or cross-stored, but they would have this little bowl of dried beans that they would put their feet into, especially for kids who maybe have a little bit more sensory sensitive, that could be a really nice grounding thing for them. They also made these really simple like bean bags, which were little kind of like mini pillows they stuffed with dried beans. They could put them into their lap when they were feeling squirmy at school or when they were having to do homework at home and were just feeling really squirmy. It's normal. It's normal for them to kind of have a lot more energy than us and have a hard time sitting still. So those bean bags were a nice kind of mini weighted thing to help them concentrate. And I mentioned the importance of temperature. You could simply take socks, fill them with rice, pop them into the microwave, even add some essential oils there, and then have them have that kind of heated sock with them. Rice sock warmers are fantastic, but they can get extraordinarily hot if you're not careful. I always say like flash it shortly, check the temp, and then give it to them, but try not to keep it on for too long. Very, very short amounts of time will get it warm. And make sure they don't have access to it because they'll be tempted to put it into the microwave themselves. Better they can see it but not access it so that you can control kind of the temperature of it. And then for some of our little ones, weighted blankets are a fantastic thing to use. Even adults enjoy using them to help them get a better sleep and feel a little bit more comforted. And we cannot forget, because if you again attend any of these webinars, you'll remember that we talk a lot about gardening, but it helps do so many things. It engages so many senses like the sight, the sound, the smell, that really visceral feeling of sinking your hands into the dirt. And it doesn't have to be an entire garden plot. It can be something extraordinarily simple. So remember when I mentioned if you grow it, you eat it? It could be really nice for them to just have something simple, a book that kind of walks them through gardening or specific ingredients they might want to grow, and then to grow the mini version. This is our office tomato plant. It is a mini tomato plant. It will not get much bigger than this, and the fruit will be very tiny, about the size of a fingernail. It's very child friendly. They can water these. Terracotta helps it dry out very quick in case they're heavy waterers like myself. But what's really nice is that they can watch the tomatoes come out, grow, pick them, and then eat them. And it really helps get all those senses engaged. They can smell it, feel it, taste it. It's such a wonderful addition that you can add. You can also think about herbs that are soft to the touch. Again, office plants, but this one has a little bit of a soft and fuzzy feel to the top, but also smells fantastic. This is lemon balm mandarina. So any herbs that you choose, just make sure that they're safe for your child to touch and to smell. And if they get tempted, yes, to eat, because they might try. So be really thoughtful about which ones you choose. I think this is one that is great for everyone, for all of this. If you have the privilege to have a small spot that you can create as a safe space for yourself, for your Keiki, and it could be tiny. It could be one of those little pop-up tents that they can put their soft blankets and toys into. They could have really nice soft lighting there. They have relaxing books that they enjoy reading for bedtime, that they can have relaxing smells, whether that's on the blankets because of the detergent, but there's just the spot that they go to. It can even be a chair that they sit in and they feel really relaxed. I think that we forget about the importance of kind of those sacred spaces that you can go to, that when you feel stressed, you go to that place and you just kind of okay, kind of recenter, reground, and take that time out for yourself. But it can be nice if there's a moment to build this kind of spot for our keiki. Of course, there is sound. This one's a little bit trickier. I think we often think about them making quite a bit of sound, but it can be used to help kind of gentle the spirit. When we use gentle music, you can play the soundtracks for their favorite movies. A lot of times their favorite songs are not the quiet songs, and that's okay. But there are instrumental versions of their favorite songs from the movies that you can have in the background so they sing along, but it's not necessarily as kind of boisterous as the original. You can also just play nature sounds in the background. You can also do grounding activities where you say, name 3 things you hear, and they have to stop in the moment and think about, like, what do I hear? You can include wind chimes in your garden, or even a small water feature so they can hear that sound in the background. Or you can have them make their own music. Something that can be fun is to play the movie, one of their favorite movies, and put it on mute and have them create a soundtrack themselves, that they're going to play along and make the soundtrack. And you get to ask questions like, what type of music or what kind of music is happening right now? Is it quiet and soft, or is it loud and intense? And of course, they will play along and love to do it, but it's really nice to use music to help them like ground and soothe, and they really enjoy making their own. There are some really nice mindful activities that they can do. Mindful eating, just sitting and not eating the food immediately, but thinking about how it grows, who helps it grow, and then taking that bite, then really sinking into that sensation. There can be different types of breathing exercises. We'll talk about those in just a minute. Going for walks and picking out all the different colors of the rainbows. We live in Hawaii. It's very easy sometimes to just, how many rainbows do you spot on our walk? Doing different grounding activities. So you heard us talking about grounding a little bit, and that could be as simple as say, tell me 3 things you see, 2 things you hear, and 1 thing you smell. That is grounding. But grounding can also be, imagine you're a tree and your feet are in the ground and your arms are the branches of the tree stretching into the sky. And now we're just going to look around and feel the breeze. So you can see how it could be any number of things. And we do have some really great worksheets that walk you through the different types of grounding there is, including just finding that comfy, cozy spot and then thinking about the things that make them happy. That's that precursor, that's that beginning seed to gratitude. The dive responses, of course, where swimming, water play, all those things can activate this gland in this portion of your face that happens when you dive. And when that gets activated, it helps calm your nervous system. So the dive response can be really nice if you have one who's like a little bit of a water baby, someone who loves the ocean, that's going to activate. But also just putting a wet cloth here can help activate that as well. I think one thing that we don't always consider is the importance of, and it's gotten kind of a bad rap, timeouts. And I will be the first to say there's a reason it's gotten those raps. But what we look to think about as an alternative is empowered breaks, to check in with your Keiki and say, are you feeling stressed? Are you feeling overwhelmed? Do you need to take a break? And then they can say, yeah, I think I do. So you can see that that's a lot different than maybe how we historically have thought about using that we want them to be able to identify how they feel and what they need. And this is a great way to bring that back in to say, you know what, even as an adult, I sometimes need time to just resettle. And we want them to be able to ask for the same. Another thing that we want to include in our kind of proverbial toolbox is movement. It's not all about being calm and quiet. I mean, these are children. They're going to want to do other things. So movement, dance, singing, all those are wonderful ways to get them back engaged with their bodies. They love to tell stories. They love stories. That's just a natural part of childhood. So tell me a story. Tell me your story. Who are you in your story? And they will go on and on. But again, we're just normalizing them, sharing how they feel and sharing their life story with us, starting at a very young age. For our little artists in the house, we want to be able to help them kind of engage that in a different way. So maybe you're going to put some art supplies. Again, think about supervision level and age appropriateness, but sometimes it can be nice for our artists who are a little bit more responsible with those supplies to say, draw me a picture of how you feel. Draw me a picture of what happiness looks like. We want them to start to have that like really comprehensive idea of emotion, and that starts these tiny steps when they're young. Also talking to them about who do you talk to that makes you laugh? Who do you talk to when you're sad? So then they know who they're going to call, or they know who they're going to ask to have support from when they're feeling that way. One of the things I get asked a lot is people say, oh, that sounds really great. Sounds real simple, but it doesn't feel like that would be simple to kind of implement. And I would say, make it fun. This is a bingo card that we have available. Make it fun. Have them be able to check things off and feel like they're getting stuff done and they're really empowered, but also just practice. It doesn't have to be very serious. You can say like every time the opportunity comes, we're just going to practice. And that's a really important thing to remember, that that's part of it. And there's a lot of imperfection in learning, and we just embrace that. Practice, practice, practice. We do have our Busy Bees group and a monthly book club. I will be highlighting this book for the month of May for our littlest ones. So if you're wanting to get more information on that, it will be there. But also our Busy Bees is where we post different things, and you'll be learning about more and more tools as we go throughout the year. But it's available if you're curious through Facebook. If you're looking at some of those examples that we gave, those emotion charts or coloring sheets that you saw, they're available. They're free for everyone to kind of download, including the calming jars recipe. It's on our website, mentalhealthhawaii.org. Click on that Get Connected banner, and you're going to see online resources for future classes and then printables for all of those different kinds of worksheets. I know that was a lot to kind of share with you today, but I do want you to be able to feel comfortable to reach out to us if you have any questions about it at that info@mentalhealthhawaii.org. And call us if you have any questions. The QR code is to our survey, which I will drop into the chat, so you can give us feedback about some things you might be interested in seeing us talk about a little bit more. But I do want to have time to be able to get these recommendations. We're so excited to partner with the Wailuku Public Library. They are doing some wonderful things there, and we couldn't be more excited. So I am going to stop my share and hand it over to Jessica.
Thank you, Dr. G. I'm so excited to be a part of this training. I attended a previous Keiki Self-Care training with Dr. G, and it was really inspirational. And I was so happy at that training that she was recommending books. And of course, as a librarian, that is where I find solace and knowledge and comfort. So I am Jessica Gleason. I'm a librarian at the Wailuku Public Library. My primary job is the bookmobile librarian, and we're one of two bookmobiles in the state of Hawaii that operate. And we visit preschools and senior centers, and we partner with the correctional facility and other places where library access may be limited. So I'm super excited to be here today to recommend some books. Dr. G mentioned books for really young kids in the category of touching. So I just wanted to make a plug for books that are sensory. So we call them toy books or movable books, touch and feel books. So those might be some ideas. You can get some inspiration from your local library about books that can be part of your toolbox that have those sensory feelings that engage with the touching senses. I also wanted to say that there are board books for infants that are high contrast that are really great for very young children that are still developing their sight. But just as a plug, we have books like this as well that are very simple and beautiful, but also more visible for children that are still developing their vision. And we have lots of board books that have to do with mindfulness or sensory, touch, sight, feel, no smells as far as I know, but there might be some special books for that too. So I want to recommend the Mindfulness Moments for Kids books. They're available in board book format. But I also want to recommend Breathe Like a Bear, which is by the same author. And this is more for parents and caregivers and educators who want ideas about breathing exercises or ways to ground Keiki using poetry, song, and movement. So I highly recommend Breathe Like a Bear. And I want to launch into one more book that occurred to me while Dr. G was talking. And it's called Before We Eat, From Farm to Table by Pat Brisson, illustrated by Mary Azarian. And if you're talking about trying to cultivate mindfulness around eating, where our food comes from, all the people it takes for the food to reach your table, especially if you're not used to gardening yet, this is a great introduction to the way foods come to be in grocery stores. And it's a great way to cultivate gratitude also, mindfulness and gratitude for the food that nurtures us. So I just wanted to plug this book as well. So Dr. G is going to share this book list with you, and it's we'll have links to the different titles that I'm going to discuss. They link right to the Hawaii State Public Library System catalog. So I encourage you, if you don't have a card yet, to apply for one. All libraries are open now. We don't have requirements, just come on in, and we're welcoming you back if you haven't been to the library in a long time. So come see us. But in terms of cultivating mindfulness and social emotional learning, picture books are for really everyone. And I believe that they make us better human beings. They expose us to other types of cultures and people and points of view. But what I've been working on is, and I'll show you real quick, is something called the Conscious Child book kits. And these are meant to spark meaningful conversations by reading books together that nurture self-love, foster empathy, and empower children to make their voices heard. And the reason that these have to do with social emotional learning and self-care is that it's important that books are mirrors, windows, and sliding glass doors. And that's a metaphor that Rudine Sims Bishop, who is considered the mother of multicultural literature, coined in one of her early essays about children's literature and how it needs to be diverse and represent all children that read them. So we created, modeled after the Oxford Lane Library's Conscious Child Family Book Discussion Kits, these 4 different categories of kits that contain books and discussion cards. So it's really important that we talk to our keiki about what is joy and self-love. How do we cultivate empathy about people that are immigrants and refugees? What does it mean to have an identity and a belonging? And also, how do we make our voices heard? And that's through solidarity and activism. So I wanted to make a plug for this because this is an important topic. I think our social and emotional and mental well-being is all tied in to what's happening in the world around us. So it's a start. I hope it inspires parents and caregivers and educators to continue these conversations in a safe way, because books are exactly that. They're a way for us to name things so that we can talk about them, so that we can heal and come together. So I wanted to give a plug for this. They're only available at Wailuku and Lahaina libraries on Maui. However, I will share in the chat a link with the resources that you can see exactly what the discussion cards are, what the books are, and further recommended reading. Now on to social and emotional learning, Keiki Self-Care. So I wanted to recommend this book, and it'll be in the list we share. It's called Layla by Galia Bernstein. And when I read this book, it was just absolutely lovely. It's about this baby baboon who is part of a very large extended family of baboons. And she becomes overwhelmed by all the noise and the ruckus, and she runs away. And she hurts her foot, and she meets this cool guy, this lizard. And in the process, she learns how to be still and how to listen and how to feel better. And then she starts to realize she misses her family. So Layla, I highly recommend because it has beautiful illustrations, expressive. You can tell she's very annoyed in this picture. So it's just an introduction to what mindfulness is in a story format, because I feel stories are the best way to engage kids. They're not so didactic or instructional, although those books can be useful. So I think I would recommend this one highly, even for slightly older kids, but particularly for preschool, kindergarten ages. So that's Layla. The other book I have is by an author, Jory John, who's written The Bad Seed. This is called The Good Egg, and it's illustrated by Pete Oswald. And I recommend this book because it's fun for parents to read too. You'll get some of the humor, and it's really applicable to an adult's journey, emotional journey. And it's basically what is it like to be the good egg in a bad carton of eggs. And it's sort of his discovery of what he needs to, after he has a breakdown, what he needs to heal himself, and that he even grows a beard, which is hysterical, and goes on this journey of what it looks like to do self-care, that he's worthy and that he needs self-care. And at the end, you know, he doesn't change the other eggs, but he's more centered and grounded and is appreciative of the imperfections that we all share, including his own. And he even pampers himself. So I highly recommend The Good Egg by Jory John. And I don't want to take up too much more time, except to say that another fun series is by Michael Ian Black. And he wrote, I'm sad, I'm worried, and I'm bored. And they all feature a potato, a girl, and a flamingo. And they're really humorous but heartfelt books about those different feelings that we all will encounter in our lives and how to cultivate resilience. And they're funny and engaging, and I highly recommend those. Also fun for parents to read. And I want to recommend 2 more books because I know we want to leave time for questions. The Color Monster is a very good book for identifying emotions, because that's where we need to start, right? We need to use the charts that Dr. G mentioned. Just generally using color is a very evocative way to do that. And the Color Monster comes in a regular picture book, but it also comes in this very cool pop-up book. And I usually share this with teachers because the pages are quite elaborate. And so they can easily get torn, but they're super engaging. For example, this says this is about the sadness. So this is sadness. It is gentle and blue like a rainy day. When you're sad, you might want to cry or be alone. So it helps to identify the feeling and also to normalize it and to say, this is where you're at and this is what it can feel like, you know, angry, red, of course. So these pop-up books are extra cool in a classroom environment or at home, but you can also read the regular picture book. And the last one I'm going to recommend is a nonfiction book that might be a good one to read first as the parent or caregiver. It's called My Mixed Emotions, Help Your Kids Handle Their Feelings. And it was recently published, and it's a really good, simple overview of, you know, what are emotions, where are they created in the body? Oh, excuse me. And then the basic happy, angry, fear, sad, and the wonder of you. And so they have really great examples and activities and the different scenarios that we can run into, like bullying, the death of a pet or a loved one. So there's so many things that we come up with in life, and it's hard to talk about them or approach them, but it's important that we be the ones that engage with our kids and start as young as possible, because I find reading all these books have benefited me, especially during the pandemic, have gotten me through, you know, I've had to go back through and try to establish, well, how am I feeling and what does make me feel better? So all of those books are available in the library system. I will share some links to the handout, to the website. I also want to give a quick plug to a book that we're using to create these social emotional book kits, which we hope to release in the next month or so. We're collaborating with Dr. Goss. And this book is called Crafting Calm, Art and Activities for Mindful Kids. And it has some great tips on observing thoughts, examining emotions, capturing joy and gratitude, and they have some great recipes and other ideas. So I highly recommend that, which you can borrow from the library. And with that, I just want to encourage you to check our website, librarieshawaii.org, for all the resources that we have, both digital and physical. And there are lots of learning opportunities too, free classes that you can take, streaming movies and videos for kids and adults. So I encourage you to check it out. I encourage you to reach out to me. I'll leave my email if you're interested, and I will keep you all posted on the progress of the social emotional learning kits. So thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you so much for sharing, Jessica. I literally am like jotting down book names and things. I think is, you know, just so profound that there's actually like this really great understanding of the importance of social emotional learning and how books play such an important role of that. But now that we're able to, you know, I'm so excited to access that as educators, as, you know, clinicians, as parents in these kits, so that we don't have to like do the groundwork and the researching. We can go to the library, check those out, share that with our family and the kids that we work with, and then return them. And there'll be so many different kinds of kits on different kinds of topics that they'll be able to kind of enjoy and see. So that's fantastic. I wanted just to check if anyone has any questions regarding some of the content that we shared today. Please know that we will be sharing some of the book recommendations, those lists and flyers to everyone so that you're able to find them. If you're looking for them, we'll also be sharing a recording of today's webinar that will be hosted on our YouTube page if you want to share that with someone who wasn't able to attend. I do see something in questions and answers. Is there an opportunity to ask about specific mental health questions relating? So if you have any specific questions for like one of your itty bitties, please feel free to message me. I'll drop my email into the chat because I know that there may be some questions around things that are specific or a little bit more private. Please feel free to reach out to me. I used to work with our little ones. The youngest I think I worked with was 2, and I did that in the community and in inpatient psychiatric care. And I know a lot of wonderful providers who are still providing support to our Keiki. See a lot of comments and people really excited about those book referrals. That's awesome. If you have any questions that do come up, please feel free to reach out to us at any time, to myself or to Jessica. I'm going to post our QR code into the chat. It's amazing how much you can spend, how much time you can spend talking about this subject. I mean, we could have spent hours talking about just breathing for our little ones. And so we always try to give the most information that we can and then sink a little bit deeper when we have those opportunities. But I think the books are a wonderful way to be able to do that in your own pace at your own time. We do like to hear from everyone about how they enjoyed it or what they would like to see in addition to what we talked about. There's a comment that says, looks like I'm heading to the library. Yes, absolutely. There's so many fantastic books, and I am a book dragon for all types of books. And I definitely, Jessica and Tammy have opened my eyes to brand new titles I've never even heard about. So it's so exciting. I don't see any questions coming in, so I just wanted to say another special thank you to Jessica Gleason and Tammy Ching for working on providing these amazing SEL kits that are going to be available in just a few months. We will absolutely be keeping you updated on their release dates and the different kinds of topics that will be there. I'll be sharing those flyers in this recording so that you can all kind of access that information beforehand. Thank you so much for joining us and supporting our Keiki in the community and building more resilience for them as we move through these difficult times and transitions back into kind of this new that we're in. Take good care of yourself. And as with all things, if you need support, please feel free to reach out to us.
Mahalo. Take care.